The hammer struck the wood, rattling the walls. Another strike. Another thick metal nail driven through the plywood covering my bedroom window. I stood perfectly still in the center of the pitch-black room. The heavy rain of a Category 4 hurricane was already tearing at the roof shingles. My father was outside, sealing me in. Total darkness surrounded me. The main electrical breaker had been cut off 10 minutes earlier. The truck engine roared to life in the driveway. Tires slashed through the rising floodwaters. They were leaving. My mother, my father, my brother Justin, and my Aunt Megan, all packed tightly into the dry cab, speeding inland to safety. I stayed behind with 3 terrified pets in a living room full of imported antique furniture. They needed a cheap security guard to protect their precious things from looters. They chose me. The red taillights faded into the relentless storm. And the silence inside the house wrapped around my throat. 11 years later, a different kind of red light flashed on my console. I pressed the headset tight against my ear. A frantic voice on the other end screamed about a multi-vehicle crash on the interstate. My hands flew across the keyboard, dispatching fire and rescue units with ice-cold precision. I am 28 years old now, a lead emergency dispatcher for the county. I spend my days managing the exact crisis systems that utterly failed me when I was 17. The terrified girl trapped in the closet is gone. The woman sitting in this chair does not break. She directs the chaos. My shift ended, and my phone buzzed with an email that would restart the war. My grandmother, Nana June, had passed away a month prior. The email was from her estate attorney, confirming the final transfer of the deed. I now officially owned her $850,000 beachfront stilt house in Galveston, Texas. It was a beautiful, sprawling property hovering above the sand on massive wooden pilings. It was also the house my parents and my aunt had been living in rent-free for the last 7 years, treating my grandmother like a free hotel service. An hour later, they summoned me to the living room of my new property. I walked in and found them sitting on the plush leather sofas like they owned the very air in the room. My father, Mark, leaned forward, arrogant and impatient. My mother, Sarah, wore a tight, practiced smile. Aunt Megan hovered in the kitchen doorway, sipping coffee she did not buy. Justin, my golden child older brother, sat beside my parents, attempting to look like the reasonable mediator. My father tossed a single sheet of paper onto the coffee table. He declared they had scraped together a family fund. They were offering me $150,000 to buy the house outright. He called it a generous family price. He demanded I sign the transfer paperwork by the end of the week so they could get back to their lives. The audacity hung in the air, thick and suffocating. $150,000 for a pristine coastal property worth nearly $1 million. They wanted to steal my inheritance to fund their retirement. I looked at the floorboards. For a fraction of a second, I was back in that dark, boarded-up bedroom, listening to the wind try to tear the roof off, wondering if the water would drown me before the walls collapsed. I remembered the sheer worthlessness of knowing my parents valued a mahogany dining table over my heartbeat. I swallowed the memory and met my father's eyes. I did not yell. I did not list my grievances. I reached into my leather tote bag, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and dropped it right on top of his insulting offer. I told them they had 30 days to vacate my property. My mother's fake smile vanished. She shrieked that I was destroying the family. Justin stood up, puffing out his chest, telling me to stop being an ungrateful brat and respect our parents. Aunt Megan muttered insults from the kitchen. I turned on my heel and walked out the front door. leaving their outrage echoing against the walls. They refused to leave quietly. Over the next 2 weeks, my mother launched a vicious, calculated smear campaign. She went door to door through the tight-knit Galveston community. She wore soft cardigans and cried on the neighbors' porches, spinning a tragic tale. She claimed I was mentally unstable, obsessed with money, and trying to force my elderly parents onto the street to commit corporate real estate fraud. Aunt Megan spent her days gossiping at the local diner, poisoning everyone who would listen. My father took a different route. He sent dark, threatening texts to my phone. One read, "You think paperwork makes you powerful. But I know how this county works." I ignored the noise. Panic is loud, strategy is silent. Knowing my father's lifelong obsession with cutting power to blind a house, I skipped standard home security systems. Instead, I ordered 4 battery-operated, cellular-connected trail cameras, the kind hunters use deep in the woods. To install them legally, I sent my parents a formal 24-hour notice for a mandatory landlord structural inspection. The next morning, I arrived with a loud, massive contractor friend. While my father puffed up his chest and argued with the contractor at the front door about property rights, I slipped quietly under the dark, sandy crawl space beneath the stilt foundation. I mounted the invisible cameras directly onto the load-bearing wooden pilings. My access was entirely earned, entirely legal, and completely undetected. Before driving back to the city, I stopped at the county archives. I pulled the official weather reports and the emergency dispatch logs from the exact night of the hurricane 11 years ago. I printed everything. I found a corporate buyer for the house, a luxury rental company willing to pay top dollar. The sale required a simple renovation permit from the local community board. My parents knew this. They ambushed the town hall meeting to block the sale. I sat at the front table of the crowded municipal building. My mother stood before the microphone, shedding convincing, heartbreaking tears. She told the zoning board that the neighborhood must stop this unethical owner. She claimed I was destroying a family legacy out of pure spite and greed. My father sat behind her, playing the stoic, betrayed patriarch. The town members murmured in sympathy. Angry glares burned into the back of my neck. The villains thought they had won. They thought they had successfully weaponized the public against me, just like they always did. I let my mother finish every single lie. I let the silence settle over the room. I stood up, walked to the projector, and plugged in my laptop. I did not defend my character. I presented the truth. First, I played a high-definition video of Aunt Megan dragging a trash can to the curb, paired with a copy of the lease my grandmother had signed. I pointed out the strict occupancy clause. I proved my parents were harboring an illegal tenant, entirely voiding any rights they claimed to have. Next, I projected a screenshot of my father's threatening text message. The words loomed massive on the wall. I told the board this was not a dispute over zoning or neighborhood safety. This was a documented extortion attempt by bitter tenants trying to force a catastrophic lowball sale. Then came the kill shot. I pulled up the official county dispatch records and the Category 4 hurricane warning logs from 11 years ago. I laid out the timeline. I detailed how my father nailed my bedroom window shut from the outside. I detailed how he cut the main breaker to prevent me from turning on lights and attracting looters. I detailed how they drove away, leaving a 17-year-old girl trapped with the pets while they slept in a safe hotel. A horrified board member leaned into his microphone and asked my father directly if he truly boarded his teenage daughter inside a house during a mandatory evacuation. My father stammers, his face flushed deep red. He tried to mumble something about protecting the property, but his voice cracked. He had absolutely no defense. The pristine, holy church lady reputation my mother had cultivated for decades instantly vaporized. The room fell into a disgusted, heavy silence. The neighbors who had pitied them moments ago now looked at them like monsters. The permit was approved unanimously. On the 30th day, the eviction deadline arrived. The toxic family finally turned on its own. I sat in my parked car down the street and watched the fallout. Furious over the public humiliation at the permit meeting, my father screamed at Aunt Megan in the driveway. He blamed her for everything. He slammed the door of Justin's truck, refusing to let her inside. I watched Aunt Megan, the lifelong freeloader, drag her cheap suitcases down the shoulder of the Galveston Highway on foot, crying into her phone. The rest of them drove away in bitter silence. 2 weeks later, the renovations were about to begin. At 2 o'clock in the morning, my phone blared with a high priority alert. The cellular trail cams had activated. Driven by pure greed, Justin's shady real estate contacts had tipped him off to a loophole. If a beachfront stilt properties foundation is flagged as structurally compromised, the corporate buyer's insurance will instantly void the contract. Justin wanted to tank my $1 million sale, leave me holding an uninsurable property, and use a shell company to buy the land for pennies. I opened the live feed. Mark and Justin were sneaking under the stilt house. Thinking they were clever, my father cut the main breaker box outside. But the cameras did not run on the house's electricity. The night vision feed showed them taking heavy steel sledgehammers to the load-bearing pilings, attempting to destroy the foundation. I did not panic. I dialed my own emergency dispatch center. I used the exact priority codes for a felony burglary in progress with structural destruction. 3 minutes later, 4 police cruisers swarmed the property. Red and blue lights illuminated the sand. The officers drew their weapons and arrested my father and my brother right in the driveway, their hands covered in splintered wood. The karmic payoff arrived in criminal court. At the bail hearing, Mark and Justin stared down up to 10 years in state prison for felony criminal mischief, a charge severely enhanced because it occurred in a designated coastal storm zone. They were terrified. My attorney cornered their public defender in the hallway with a ruthless civil settlement. I offered them a choice. They would voluntarily sign over the entire $150,000 they had hoarded in their escrow account, handing it directly to me as immediate civil restitution for the foundational damage. If they signed, I would speak to the district attorney and ask for probation. If they refused, I would push for the maximum prison sentence. Faced with a decade behind bars, their arrogance shattered. They signed the papers. They bankrupted themselves to stay out of a jail cell. The very money they tried to use to steal my grandmother's house was legally seized and transferred into my account, fully funding the luxury renovations of the property they tried to destroy. I walked out of the courthouse, blocked their numbers, and never looked back. Silence is not peace. It is a shield for abusers. The moment you expose them to the light, they lose their power. My parents relied on the assumption that I would keep their secrets to maintain a fake image of a happy family. They thought the biological title of mother and father gave them a lifelong pass to treat me like a disposable asset. They were wrong. Forgiveness without accountability is just an open invitation for the next cruelty. Blood does not make a family. Protection does. You owe absolutely nothing to people who only claim the title of family when they want something from you, but abandon you when the storm hits. The greatest revenge you can ever achieve is structural. You do not need to scream. You do not need to match their toxic emotional chaos. You build a life they cannot touch. You establish boundaries they cannot cross. You document everything. You protect your peace. And you let their own unchecked entitlement be the exact trap that ruins them. If you are the one they left in the dark, the one they called dramatic for simply surviving their cruelty, I need you to hear this. When did you finally realize you were not the problem? What was the iron boundary that finally set you free? Tell me your story in the comments below. The more we speak, the less they can hide. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are watching Lauren's story and wondering why she even engaged with them in the first place. You are thinking, why didn't she just sell the house immediately? Change her name and disappear the second she got the deed? Why go through the stress of dealing with their lowball offers, the town hall meetings, and the smear campaign? It is incredibly easy to judge from the outside. But let us break down exactly what happens when you are raised by people who treat you as property. Psychologists call this the slot machine effect, or intermittent reinforcement. When you grow up starved for affection, and your abusers occasionally throw you a crumb of normal behavior, your brain gets addicted to the hope that maybe, finally, they will love you. Lauren was not stupid. She was grieving her grandmother, part of her, that terrified 17-year-old girl in the hurricane, was likely hoping that inheriting the house would finally earn her a seat at the table. It took that $150,000 insult for the illusion to break completely. Once the illusion broke, Lauren executed what I call the street smart financial defense. She did not just react emotionally, she reacted strategically. Look at the audit strategy she used at the town hall. Scammers, manipulators, and toxic relatives absolutely hate details. They thrive on vague emotional statements, like crying about a family legacy to the permit board. Lauren combated emotional manipulation with cold, hard documentation. The lease, the text messages, the county weather reports. When you are dealing with narcissists, stop arguing with their feelings and start bringing receipts. Documents do not have emotions, and they do not stutter. Then there's building the case. Notice how Lauren did not confront her father when he threatened her over text. She did not yell at him for installing the cameras. She let them act. She let them break the law. And she recorded it. When you are under attack, your silence is a weapon. Let them make the mistakes while you gather the evidence. Finally, she executed the buyout. By leveraging their freedom for their escrow cash, she did not just punish them, she financed her own recovery. She forced them to invest in her future. Blood does not make you family, loyalty does. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you. Even if you share a last name, trust is earned, not owed, and respect is the baseline, not a luxury. You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep toxic people warm. If this story resonated with you, or if you have had to build your own iron boundaries to survive your family, share your experience in the comments. Subscribe for more strategies on navigating life, protecting your assets, and taking your power back. You are worth protecting. Act like it. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are watching Lauren's story and thinking, why give them 30 days? Why even let them stay in that house one more night after what they did to her in that hurricane? Why not just change the locks the second the deed cleared? It is incredibly easy to judge from the outside. But let us break down exactly what happens when you are raised by people who treat you as a disposable asset. Psychologists call this the slot machine effect, or intermittent reinforcement. When you grow up starved for affection, and your abusers occasionally throw you a crumb of normal behavior, your brain gets addicted to the hope that maybe, finally, they will step up and love you. Lauren was not weak for hesitating or hoping. She was dealing with a deep psychological addiction to the idea of a family. It took that insulting $150,000 lowball offer for the illusion to break completely. Once that illusion shattered, Lauren executed what I call the street smart financial defense. She rejected movie logic. There were no screaming matches in the rain, no dramatic physical fights. She reacted with cold, calculated strategy. First, look at the audit strategy she used at the permit meeting. Scammers, manipulators, and toxic relatives absolutely hate details. They thrive on vague emotional narratives, like her mother crying about a family legacy to the zoning board. Lauren combated that emotional manipulation with undeniable documentation. The lease, the text messages, the county weather reports. When you are dealing with narcissists, stop arguing with their feelings and start bringing receipts. Documents do not have emotions, and they do not stutter. Second, she mastered building the case. Notice how Lauren did not confront her father when he sent those dark threats. She did not yell at him for trying to block the sale. Instead, she used her legal right to a 24-hour inspection and quietly installed cellular cameras. She let them act. She let them break the law. And she recorded every single swing of that sledgehammer. When you are under attack, your silence is a weapon. Let them make the mistakes while you gather the evidence. Finally, she executed the buyout. By leveraging their freedom for their escrow cash at the bail hearing, she did not just punish them. She financed her own recovery. She took that $150,000 and forced them to invest in her future, completely removing them from her life in the process. Blood does not make you family. Loyalty does. You are allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you share a last name. Trust is earned, not owed. And respect is the baseline, not a luxury. And here's the part no one tells you about winning. When the legal dust settled, there was no orchestra. No dramatic sunrise where every scar magically disappeared. There was just Lauren standing alone inside that Galveston house after the renovation crew finished, listening to the quiet sound of the waves moving under the floorboards. For the first time in her life, that house did not feel haunted by fear. It did not belong to the people who trapped her in the dark. It did not belong to the parents who saw her as a body to be used, a daughter to be blamed, or a shield to be nailed behind plywood while they escaped to safety. It belonged to her. She walked from room to room with her hand trailing along the freshly painted walls. The bedroom window that had once been sealed shut was now replaced with hurricane-rated glass. Wide and clean, looking straight out toward the water. She stood in front of it for a long time. 11 years ago, she had stared at black plywood from the inside, wondering if anyone in the world would come back for her. Now she stood in the same kind of coastal silence. Older, stronger, and completely unowned. That is what toxic families never understand. They think survival makes you obedient. They think if they abandon you once, humiliate you enough, scare you badly enough, you will spend the rest of your life begging for a place beside them. But sometimes, abandonment does the opposite. Sometimes it teaches you exactly how much you can survive without them. Lauren did not become cruel. She became precise. There is a difference. Cruelty is what Mark and Sarah did when they left a teenager in a boarded house during a hurricane. Precision is what Lauren did when she documented the truth, followed the law, and let consequences arrive with clean hands. Months later, the luxury rental company sent her the first quarterly earnings report. The property was booked almost every weekend. Families were paying thousands of dollars to stay in the same house her parents had tried to steal. sabotage, and destroy. Lauren looked at the numbers, smiled once, and transferred a portion of the profit into a savings account named after Nana June. Not Mark, not Sarah, not Justin, Nana June. Because legacy is not what greedy relatives demand from you. Legacy is what survives them. And maybe that is the deepest lesson here. You cannot always stop people from betraying you. You cannot control the lies they tell, the tears they perform, or the public image they polish until it shines. But you can control your records. You can control your exits. You can control the moment you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Lauren's parents wanted her to stay trapped in the role they assigned her at 17, the quiet one, the useful one, the one who would sit in the dark and guard everyone else's valuables. But she finally realized her life was the valuable thing. Her safety was the valuable thing. Her peace was the valuable thing. So, if you are listening to this right now and you are still waiting for an apology from people who benefited from your silence, hear this clearly. Their confession is not the key to your freedom. Their approval is not the door. Their regret is not the rescue boat. You are allowed to leave before they understand. You are allowed to protect yourself before they agree. You are allowed to build a life so solid that even when they come back with hammers, cameras are already rolling, paperwork is already filed, and the door is already locked from your side. Lauren did not just win a house. She reclaimed the girl who was left behind in the storm, and this time, no one was ever going to nail her window shut again. You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep toxic people warm. If this story resonated with you, or if you have had to build your own iron boundaries to survive your family, share your experience in the comments. Subscribe for more strategies on navigating life, protecting your assets, and taking your power back. You are worth protecting. Act like it.